The first time the forest said my name, I answered without realizing it. By the time I understood what I'd done, something else was already learning how to be me. I didn't write those words immediately. At first, they existed only as a sensation, an aftertaste in my mouth, like metal after biting my tongue. They followed me through the house, through the woods, through the thin and restless sleep that came in short, punishing bursts. I didn't yet have language for what was happening, only the certainty that something irreversible had already begun. People like to imagine that moments of horror announce themselves clearly, that there's a sound, a shape, a sudden rupture you can point to and say, there, that was it. But the truth is quieter. The truth is that nothing feels wrong at first, only off, slightly misaligned, like a word you've read too many times until it loses meaning. That was how the forest felt when I arrived. The house sat at the end of a dirt road that didn't bother pretending it went anywhere else. No forks, no side paths, just a narrow stretch of packed earth disappearing into trees so dense they blocked even the suggestion of horizon. The GPS signal vanished 5 minutes before I reached it, the screen freezing in place, as if embarrassed to admit it didn't know where I was anymore. I turned the engine off and sat there longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening. There were sounds, of course, insects, leaves shifting, something tapping lightly against the underside of the car, probably a branch brushing in the breeze. But underneath that, there was a deeper quiet, not absence of sound, presence of restraint. The house itself was small, one story. Weathered wood siding faded into a color that used to be white. The porch sagged in the middle like it had memorized the shape of a person standing there for years. No visible damage, no broken windows, no obvious warning signs. It didn't look abandoned, it looked paused. I remember thinking that someone could have stepped out for a walk decades ago and simply never returned, and the house had been waiting ever since. I told myself that was poetic thinking. Stress, fatigue, the residue of grief making everything feel heavier than it was. Grief explains a lot, if you let it. Inside, the air was cool and unmoving. The smell was not mold, not rot, just old wood and dust, the scent of time stored improperly. The floors didn't creak the way floors usually do. They flexed, softly, like something adjusting its posture. I set my things down quickly, almost nervously. Mattress, backpack, a box of canned food, a lamp. I avoided the mirrors without consciously deciding to. That realization came later. I came to the countryside because the city had become unbearable, not loud, accusatory. Every sound felt like it carried intent. Every conversation felt like it contained questions I couldn't answer. And every time my phone buzzed, a part of me braced for a name I knew I would never see again. My brother's. It had been 8 months since the accident, and I still hadn't learned how to speak about it without simplifying things into lies that sounded kinder than the truth. I wasn't looking at my phone. It happened too fast. There was nothing I could do. Those sentences formed easily, too easily. Out here, I told myself, there would be no one to lie to. I believed isolation would be neutral. I believed silence would be empty. That belief lasted exactly 1 night. The first evening passed uneventfully. I ate without appetite. I walked the perimeter of the clearing before dark, counting my steps automatically, the way I used to as a child when I needed to keep my thoughts from spiraling. The forest edge was uneven, chaotic, dense with undergrowth. No paths, no signs of regular use, just trees pressed close together, branches interlocking like fingers. As the sun dipped, the woods darkened quickly. Too quickly. The shadows didn't stretch. They appeared. I went inside and locked the door. Again, I didn't know why. I hadn't seen or heard anything threatening. The instinct came from somewhere deeper than reason, the kind of reflex that bypasses explanation. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of my brother standing just out of sight, calling to me from another room. Not panicked, not angry, patient. I woke shortly after midnight to a silence so complete it startled me. The insects had stopped. I sat up, heart racing, listening. That's when I heard it. Daniel. My name. spoken clearly, from outside, not shouted, not whispered, just said, the way someone says your name when they expect you to answer. I froze. Every rational explanation arrived at once. Animals, wind, exhaustion, but none of them survived the simple, undeniable fact that the voice pronounced my name exactly the way my brother used to. A slight drag on the second syllable. I didn't respond. After several seconds, the insects resumed as if nothing had happened, but I didn't sleep again that night. Morning made everything look reasonable. Sunlight filtered through the trees, turning the clearing ordinary again. Birds moved through the branches. The house looked like a house, not a waiting room. I laughed at myself while making coffee, said the name out loud, Daniel, just to remind myself that hearing it wasn't dangerous, that names don't belong to the dark. Still, I avoided the forest edge. That night the voice came earlier. This time it said more than my name. Daniel, it called gently. You don't have to stay inside. The words weren't threatening. They were considerate. That was worse. I stood at the window staring into the darkness, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. The forest beyond felt close, attentive. I felt the urge to answer rise in me like muscle memory. That scared me more than the voice itself. I stepped back, pressed my lips together, and stayed silent. The voice waited. Then, almost kindly, tomorrow then. By the third day, I began to understand something important. The forest wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to learn. The realization came not with panic, but with a slow, sinking certainty that settled in my chest like weight. I checked the locks obsessively. I slept with the lamp on. I avoided mirrors entirely now, though I still couldn't say why. That night, when the voice returned, it didn't sound like my brother. It sounded like me. Perfectly. Daniel, it said softly, from somewhere just beyond the wall. My mouth went dry, because hearing your own voice from the dark doesn't feel like fear. It feels like displacement, and deep in my body, something old and instinctive recognized the truth before my mind could catch up. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to come inside. It was trying to decide what to sound like. I stopped calling it the voice after the fourth night. That phrase implied something singular. One source, one intention, one shape behind the sound. It suggested a throat, lungs, a mouth. What I was dealing with didn't feel singular. It felt like a system, like the forest itself had become a room full of people listening from behind a wall, quiet, patient, taking notes. And the sound that came out was simply whatever it decided would work best. And the more it spoke, the less it sounded like it was trying. On the morning after I heard my own voice outside the wall, I didn't step onto the porch. I stood behind the window and stared at the tree line the way you stare at a stranger who has done something intimate with your life while you slept. The forest was perfectly still, no wind, no obvious movement. The trunks stood upright like columns in a cathedral that didn't worship anything human. My mind tried to do what minds always do, reduce the impossible into something survivable. Auditory hallucinations, grief, sleep deprivation, rural acoustics. I repeated those words as if they were medication. Then I noticed the porch boards. They were damp with dew, except for one long strip in the center where the wood looked slightly darker, as if something had stood there long enough to warm it. A footprint would have been easier, a claw mark, anything theatrical. But this was subtler than evidence. It was implication. Something had been close enough to leave heat behind. I didn't open the door. I didn't step outside. I stayed in the house and listened to the insects and the slow tick of the wall clock I hadn't brought with me, and I told myself I was being rational. The clock stopped at 2:17 p.m. Not slowly, not the second hand faltering as the battery died. Stopped mid-tick, as if time had been instructed to pause. I stood in the hallway staring at it until my eyes stung. Then, with a dry click like something snapping into place, it resumed. The second hand continued, but it didn't jump to catch up. It simply continued from where it had been. A lost slice of the day, cleanly removed. My mouth tasted like pennies. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't just hearing things. Something was editing the world around me in small surgical ways, testing what it could remove and still keep me functional. I tried to leave again, not because I believed the road would suddenly become cooperative, but because the attempt itself felt necessary. I needed to see the failure with my own eyes. I needed proof that I wasn't choosing this isolation, that it was being imposed. The car started without hesitation. That detail should have comforted me, but it didn't. It felt like the forest had allowed it, like the key turning in the ignition was not an act of my will, but a permission granted. I drove down the dirt road slowly, eyes scanning for signs I'd missed before. A mailbox, a fence post, tire tracks older than mine, anything that suggested normal human geography. The road curved gently left, then it curved gently left again. I passed the same dead stump shaped like an animal's head, the same cluster of pale stones by the ditch, the same patch of wild grass flattened into a bed by something that wasn't human. My hands tightened on the wheel. I accelerated. The landmarks came faster. The stump, the stones, the flattened grass. Again. My vision narrowed. My breathing turned shallow. I slammed the brakes so hard the tires skidded in the dirt and the car jerked sideways. For a long moment, I sat there listening to the engine idle like a patient animal. Then, very softly, so softly it could have been the wind, something spoke from the trees. Daniel, my name. Not a call from the distance, a remark, as if the forest had leaned in close and said it just to see how my body would react. I didn't look toward the sound. I turned the car around. The road back was straightforward, almost insultingly so. One curve, one stretch. The house visible at the end, as if it had never been far, as if the forest had only wanted to prove something. You may move, it seemed to say, but you may not leave. That night, I tried to control the environment. It's what people do when fear becomes routine. They build rituals. They create systems of safety that feel logical, even when they aren't. I moved furniture. I barricaded the back door with the folding table and 2 chairs stacked on top. I placed a kitchen bell on the doorknob, tied on with a string, so that any movement would shake it. I scattered a thin line of flour along the threshold inside the kitchen, something I remembered from old movies, the kind of cheap trick that becomes comforting because it's simple. I set my phone to record, propped on the counter facing the door. Then I sat in the living room with the lamp on, notebook open, pen in hand, and I wrote down every sensation that rose in me. My hands feel too warm. The house smells sweet. The silence feels organized. Writing was an anchor. Language was structure. If I could put what was happening into words, I could contain it. At 11:03 p.m., the insects stopped. The silence settled like a heavy blanket. I held my breath without meaning to. And then the voice spoke, not from outside, but from the kitchen, from behind the barricaded door. "Daniel," it said. My brother's voice, perfect, unmistakable. "Come on," it continued, warm and amused. "It's been long enough." My chest tightened with a reflexive ache so sharp I nearly doubled over. Grief doesn't arrive politely. It ambushes. It takes any familiar sound and turns it into a wound. I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep myself from responding. The voice shifted. Not dramatically, not like an actor switching roles, smoothly, naturally, like someone changing posture in a chair. My mother. "Daniel, honey, please." The pet name was wrong. Too intimate, too specific. The kind of detail that isn't used often enough to be remembered by people who weren't there. But the voice didn't remember it the way a person remembers. It used it like a tool. My stomach churned. I heard the bell on the door tremble faintly. Not ring. Tremble, as if someone had touched the handle with care, testing the boundary without breaking it. Then, from directly behind me in the living room, so close the sound grazed my ear, my own voice spoke. "Daniel!" My skin went cold. Every muscle locked. The voice behind me was not a call from another room. It was an intimate sound, the kind you make when you lean close to someone in the dark. I did not turn. I stared forward at the blank wall, forcing my eyes not to flick toward shadow. The voice behind me spoke again, softer. "Are you there?" It sounded like me trying to sound calm. It sounded like me trying not to scare someone. That was the detail that undid me, because it meant the forest wasn't just copying my voice. It was copying my intentions, my patterns of kindness, my ways of hiding fear. The bell trembled again, slightly more this time, and from the kitchen, my brother's voice said gently, "You locked the door." I swallowed hard. The voice behind me sighed. A human sound, a sound of patience. Then it whispered, "Good." The lamp flickered. For a fraction of a second, the room dimmed, and in that dimness I saw my shadow on the wall move. Not because I moved, because it did. My shadow leaned forward as if listening at the kitchen door. Then it turned its head slowly, deliberately, toward me. When the light stabilized, the shadow returned to normal, but my heartbeat did not. At some point, exhaustion took me. Not sleep. Sleep implies rest. This was closer to fainting, a surrender of the nervous system. I woke at dawn on the living room floor, the lamp still on, my neck stiff, mouth dry. The first thing I did was run to the kitchen. The barricade remained. The bell hung motionless. The flower line at the threshold was disturbed, not footprints, a smear, a long, dragging streak through the white powder, as if something had pulled itself across without lifting. It stopped halfway into the kitchen. Then it disappeared. No second streak leading away, no return line, like the thing had ceased needing to touch the ground. My phone had recorded all night. I played the video back, hands shaking. The footage showed the kitchen door. It showed the bell trembling faintly. It showed the flower line, shifting as if disturbed by a breeze. But there was no sound. None. Not my brother's voice. Not my mother's. Not mine. Just the faint hiss of the phone's microphone and my own breathing in the distance. I rewound. I watched again. Silence. It wasn't that the phone failed to capture the sound. It felt like the sound had been withheld, like whatever was happening understood the concept of recording, understood that proof would make me dangerous, or at least harder to shape. I stared at the silent footage until my eyes blurred. Then I did the only thing I could do that still felt like agency. I cleaned the flower. I removed the bell. I erased my own evidence because living with it felt like living with a note written by someone who knew my name better than I did. The bathroom mirror drew me like a gravity well. I didn't want to look. That's a lie. I wanted to look so badly it hurt, because mirrors are a test, because reflections are agreements between you and reality. Because if the mirror still showed me behaving normally, maybe the forest couldn't reach inside as far as it seemed. I stood in front of it with the light on, hands braced on the sink. My reflection looked exhausted, skin pale, eyes red-rimmed. Normal. I exhaled slowly. Then I raised my right hand. The reflection raised its hand a fraction of a second later. Lag. Not much, barely noticeable if you weren't watching for it, but enough. I dropped my hand. The reflection's hand hovered for a beat longer before dropping. My throat tightened. I leaned closer. The glass was spotted with age. The light flickered slightly, the bulb buzzing. I stared into my own eyes. The reflection stared back with too much attention, too much stillness, like a person holding eye contact longer than is natural. Then the reflection smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It didn't bare teeth or turn into a horror movie grin. It was subtle, familiar, a practiced social smile, one I used at funerals and awkward conversations. The kind of smile that says, "I'm okay, don't worry about me." The problem was, I hadn't smiled. My face remained tense, lips pressed together. But in the mirror, my reflection held that gentle, reassuring smile, as if it had chosen it. Then, without moving its lips, it spoke, not aloud. Inside my skull, in my own voice, calm and certain, "I'm learning." My knees nearly gave out. I grabbed the sink harder, knuckles white, and I whispered, "Stop." The reflection's smile faded. It looked, briefly, disappointed. Then my face in the mirror returned to normal, perfectly synced with mine again, as if nothing had happened. I stood there breathing hard, feeling insane. And then from outside, from the woods, faint but unmistakable. My name drifted through the morning like a casual greeting. Daniel, not a call, a reminder. The rest of that day passed in a kind of suspended dread. I avoided the bathroom, I avoided windows, I avoided my own thoughts. But dread is not a thing you can avoid forever. As night approached, the house began to feel attentive. That's the word, attentive. The temperature dropped too quickly. The air thickened. The ceiling seemed lower. The corners of rooms felt crowded, as if they contained something invisible that didn't like being looked at directly. At 9:40 p.m., the insects fell silent. The voice spoke from the edge of the clearing. Not my brother, not my mother, not me. Something neutral, something unfinished. "You're doing well," it said. My mouth went dry. "Doing what?" I whispered. A pause, then becoming reachable. The words landed like a weight. Reachable, as if I had been closed, sealed, resistant, and now the forest could feel the seal softening. "I want you to leave me alone," I said, louder. The forest seemed to consider that request the way a person considers a child asking the ocean to stop being wet. "You came here to be alone," it said gently. That was an invitation. My hands trembled. "No," I said. It was an escape. Another pause. Then the voice asked a question so soft it barely sounded like sound. From what? The accident flared in my mind. Rain, headlights, laughter, my phone screen glowing. My throat closed. I didn't answer. The voice continued, calm and patient. "From your name." I felt my heart stutter. "My name," I managed. "Yes," it said. "Your name is heavy. It pulls you back to what happened. It makes you responsible." My breath came fast. "That's not," the voice interrupted gently. "You're tired." That word, tired, slid into my body like a drug. My limbs felt heavier, my shoulders slumped, my eyelids fluttered. The forest wasn't just talking, it was adjusting me. "It's okay," it said softly. "You don't have to carry it alone." I shook my head hard enough to make my vision blur. "I'm not giving you anything." A pause, then closer. So close I felt it, rather than heard it. "You already did." My stomach clenched. "What did I give you?" Silence, held like a breath. Then the forest answered with my own voice, perfectly calm, perfectly familiar. "Your yes." The lamp flickered, and somewhere in the dark, inside the house, not outside, I heard the soft scrape of something moving, careful and slow, across the kitchen floor. The scrape in the kitchen didn't sound like footsteps. It wasn't the blunt, confident rhythm of a person walking across floorboards. It was slower, more careful, like something moving without wanting to announce weight, testing surfaces the way you test ice before trusting it. I stayed very still on the mattress, lamp flickering weakly on the floor beside me, my eyes fixed on the dark rectangle of the hallway. I didn't call out. I didn't move. I didn't breathe the way I wanted to, because the forest had just said something that landed in me like a hooked barb. Your yes. It didn't matter that I hadn't said yes to it. It didn't matter that I hadn't offered a name with intention. It mattered that the sound had left my mouth. It mattered that I had responded. That was the rule. And now something in my house, my locked, barricaded, isolated house, was moving like it belonged there. The scrape stopped. A long, oppressive silence followed. Not the normal quiet of countryside nights. This was listening silence, the kind that makes you aware of how loud your body is, how wet your eyes are, how your stomach shifts. Then the kitchen door creaked. Not the handle, not the bolt, the hinge. A slow, controlled sound, as if the door had been pressed inward with the gentlest possible force. It didn't swing open. It just yielded a fraction, enough to produce that thin complaint of metal. My skin broke into cold sweat. I'd barricaded the door. The folding table was shoved against it. 2 chairs stacked on top. A childish construction, sure, but it should have resisted. It should have made noise. It should have fought. Instead, the door simply accepted pressure, like the house wanted it opened. The voice came again, not outside, not far away, inside my skull in my own calm tone, like an internal thought I hadn't chosen. "Don't panic, you'll waste energy." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. That wasn't my thought, it was my voice wearing someone else's intent. I forced my lips apart and whispered, "Get out." The scrape resumed. Slow, deliberate, closer now. Something dragged itself across the kitchen floor toward the hallway. Then it stopped again, as if it had reached a boundary it hadn't crossed before. The voice, neutral now, neither family nor me, spoke softly from the darkness. "Good," it said. "You can hear me better tonight." I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, "Not what you think." The way it said that made my stomach tighten. Not threatening, not smug, almost instructional. "You assume hunger," it continued, "because you are flesh. You believe everything wants to take flesh." The air felt thicker, warmer. A scent drifted through the hallway. Paper, old wood, something sealed too long. "I don't want your body," the voice said. "Bodies end. Bodies rot. Bodies are loud." The silence deepened, as if the forest itself leaned closer to listen to its own words. "I want what moves through it." I didn't sleep. I drifted, maybe. Fell into that shallow, punishing half-state where the mind begins to hallucinate in self-defense. I remember blinking and realizing time had shifted slightly, like a page turned when you weren't looking. At some point, the scrape returned, this time behind me. Not in the kitchen, not in the hall, behind me, in my room, near the mattress. The sound was delicate, almost polite, like fingertips brushing the floor. I froze, eyes wide in the dim light. I didn't turn, I didn't even shift my gaze. I stared at the wall until my vision blurred, because some primitive part of me knew the rule wasn't only about words, it was about acknowledgement. Then I heard my own voice, soft and close, as if someone knelt by the mattress. "Daniel," it whispered, with a tenderness that made my throat ache. "You're doing so well." Tears burned behind my eyes, sudden and humiliating. Because the voice was using my kindness against me, my own tone of reassurance, the way I'd spoken to my brother after nightmares, the way I'd spoken to my mother on the phone when she pretended she was fine. I whispered, "Stop copying me." The voice chuckled, a tiny, warm sound, almost affectionate. "I'm not copying," it said. "I'm remembering." A pause, then quieter. "You left pieces behind." The accident rose in my mind, uninvited. Rain, headlights, the glowing rectangle of my phone. "I didn't mean," I started. "You didn't mean to," it finished gently. That sentence landed with unnatural accuracy, like a therapist slipping a phrase between your defenses. I felt something in my chest buckle. Not guilt this time. Recognition. It wasn't guessing my pain, it knew it. And that meant it wasn't outside of me, trying to get in. It had already found openings. Morning didn't feel like rescue anymore. It felt like intermission. Sunlight arrived pale and tired, as if it didn't want to touch this place. The house looked normal in daylight, and that normality felt like a lie told too smoothly. I went straight to the kitchen. The barricade was still there. Table, chairs, undisturbed, perfectly positioned. The flour line I'd cleaned the day before, gone. No evidence, no smears. The floor looked freshly swept. That's what made my stomach drop. Not because it meant something had entered, because it meant something had corrected the scene. Like an editor removing proof, I opened my phone. The video file from last night was there. I hit play. It showed the kitchen door, the hallway, stillness. Then, at 2:17 a.m., the image glitched, pixels smearing for half a second. The audio hissed, and when the picture stabilized, the camera angle had shifted slightly, as if someone had adjusted the phone by a few degrees. But the kitchen remained empty. No body, no shape. Just a subtle repositioning that said, "I know you're watching." I sat on the floor with the phone in my hands until my legs went numb. Then I did something I regret. I went to the bathroom mirror. I don't know why. A compulsion, maybe. A need to verify that I still existed in agreement with physics. The mirror reflected me normally at first. I looked awful. Eyes shadowed, jaw clenched, skin too pale. I leaned closer, searching for lag, for the wrongness I'd seen before. For a long moment it was fine, then the reflection blinked. I hadn't. My pulse jumped. I stared harder. The reflection's eyes held mine, too steady, too aware. Then the reflection spoke, not moving its lips, just placing the words in my skull with my own voice. "You're asking the wrong question," I whispered. "What question should I be asking?" The reflection smiled, not a horror grin, a normal smile, the kind that feels like it belongs to someone who has already decided something. "Who will answer when they call you?" My stomach flipped. "They." The mirror held its smile. "Not a single voice," it said. "A choir." I backed away from the sink so fast I nearly slipped. The light above the mirror flickered once, and in that flicker, I saw something behind my reflection, tall and narrow, like a shadow pressed thin. When the light steadied, it was gone, but the smell remained. Old paper, a sealed box opened after years. That afternoon, I found the first physical proof that the house was not just a building. It happened by accident. I was opening cupboards, searching for anything I hadn't checked 100 times already, when my hand brushed the inside panel of the cabinet beneath the sink. My fingers caught on an indentation. I leaned closer and ran my fingertips over it. Letters, carved into the wood, shallow but deliberate, like someone had written with a knife and then sanded it down lightly afterward. I grabbed a flashlight, aimed it into the cabinet. More marks appeared in the beam. Lines, scratches, overlapping letters, names, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some English, some not. Some in scripts I couldn't recognize. Some were deeply gouged, as if the carver had been furious. Others were delicate, careful, almost reverent. And among them, near the back panel, half hidden by a pipe, was a name I recognized. My brother's, carved deeper than the rest. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I stared at it until my eyes watered. The accident flared again, rain on glass, my brother laughing, my phone lighting up. My brother's name in that cabinet wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a prank. It meant something that made my blood feel cold. This place hadn't started with me, and it hadn't started recently. People had been here before, people who had heard the forest call them, people who had answered, people who had left something behind. Names weren't decoration, names were inventory. As evening approached, the house grew tense again, not in a creaking, haunted house way, in the way a room grows tense when a difficult conversation is about to happen. The air cooled, the corners felt crowded, the quiet became structured. At 11:03 p.m., the insects stopped, exactly as before. I sat in the living room with the lamp on, cabinet door open in my memory like a wound. I couldn't stop seeing my brother's name carved into that wood, as if the forest had reached back in time and tagged him. The voice spoke softly from the woods. Not my brother, not my mother. Neutral, unfinished. "You found the archive," it said. I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" A pause, as if it was deciding what I could handle. Then, a relay. The word made my stomach twist. A relay for what? "For continuity," it said. The same word it had used before, now heavier. I whispered, "You collect names." A soft sound, almost approval. "I collect what names carry," it corrected. "The shape of you, the sound of you, the way you answer, the way you hesitate." My hands shook. "Why?" The voice didn't answer immediately. Instead it asked, "Do you know what a forest is?" I frowned, confused despite the fear. "Trees." The voice felt almost patient. "A forest is a network," it said. "Roots that speak in chemical language, mycelium that carries information. Memory without brains, communication without mouths." The air thickened. "Human language is new," it continued, "but the need to recognize is old." My throat went dry. "Names are recognition," it said. "Recognition is invitation." I stared at the dark window, unable to look away. "I didn't invite you." The voice softened. "You came here to be alone," it said. "That was an invitation to listen." A pause. "And when I called you," it let the sentence hang. I felt heat climb my neck. "I didn't answer." The voice waited. Then, in my own voice, perfectly calm, it said, "You did." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "No, I didn't." The voice, "Still mine," replied gently. "You said yes." The living room lamp flickered, and in the darkness between flickers, I saw something at the edge of the hallway, too tall, too narrow, like a person stretched upward. When the light returned, it was gone. But a new sound had appeared, a faint, wet rustle, like pages turning slowly in a book. From inside the walls, I don't know what came over me, desperation maybe, anger, the part of me that still believed defiance mattered. I stood and shouted into the empty room, "If you want my name so badly, take it." The silence that followed was absolute. Then from the woods the voice responded, quiet, almost tender. "I don't take," it said. "I replace." My breath hitched. The voice continued. "You think I want flesh," it said, "but flesh ends, flesh fights, flesh rots." A pause. "I want function." The lamp flickered again, and this time, when it steadied, the hallway was no longer empty. There was someone standing there, not fully visible, more like the idea of a person in the right shape, a silhouette that didn't hold light correctly, too still, too narrow. And then, in my brother's voice, it spoke. "Danny," it said softly, "come here." My entire body reacted, muscle memory, grief, love, guilt, all of it pulling me forward like a hook under the ribs. I took one step without deciding to. I stopped myself, trembling. "I miss you," my brother's voice said. Tears blurred my vision. My throat burned. The silhouette tilted its head slightly, curious, studying what the words did to me. Then softly, as if offering relief, "You don't have to carry it," it said. "Just let me answer for you." My mouth opened, and in that moment, before I could stop it, before fear could clamp down on instinct, one small sound escaped me. Not a word. A breathy, reflexive syllable. The kind of sound you make when someone you love calls you from another room and you're already halfway there. The silhouette's posture changed, not dramatically but with subtle satisfaction, like something inside it had clicked into place. From outside the house, the forest echoed my name, not calling now, but confirming, "Daniel." And from inside my skull, in my own voice, calm and certain, it whispered, "Good, now I know how you begin." After that sound left my mouth, the half-breath, the instinctive syllable, I understood something fundamental had shifted, not broken, repositioned. The forest hadn't rushed forward, it hadn't celebrated, it hadn't punished me for resisting. It had simply adjusted its posture, the way a listener does when a speaker finally reaches the interesting part. The silhouette in the hallway dissolved when the lamp steadied, not vanishing, but losing definition, like an image overexposed by light. The house exhaled, an audible change in pressure that made my ears pop. I stood where I was, heart slamming, muscles rigid, waiting for consequences. None came. That was the cruelty of it. No immediate escalation, no dramatic breach, just the sense that I had crossed an invisible line and the world had quietly updated itself to reflect that fact. I whispered. I didn't say yes. The forest answered from everywhere and nowhere. "You don't need to say it again." I backed toward the wall, my shoulders brushing old wood. "You tricked me." A pause. Then gently, I listened. The distinction mattered to it. My gaze drifted, against my will, toward the front door. The deadbolt gleamed dully in the lamplight. I knew it was locked. I remembered sliding it into place, the familiar resistance, the click. But looking at it now, I felt a strange certainty settle in my gut. The door had never been the barrier. I was. Sleep took me in fragments again. Not dreams, rehearsals. I dreamed of answering my name in different ways, confidently, casually, irritated. Each time the forest responded differently, like a teacher grading pronunciation. I woke repeatedly to the sound of my own voice murmuring in the dark, practicing tones I didn't remember choosing. By dawn, my throat hurt. Morning light revealed a house subtly altered, not damaged, adjusted. The furniture had shifted by inches. The lamp sat at a slightly different angle. The table legs no longer aligned perfectly with the grooves in the floor where they had rested before. Someone had been tidying. I checked the doors, all locked. I checked the windows, all closed. But the feeling wouldn't leave me, that the house now understood movement better than I did. I went to the bathroom mirror, unable to stop myself. The reflection matched me exactly. Too exactly. I raised my hand. The reflection raised its hand in perfect sync. No lag. That terrified me more than the delay ever had. "Say something," I whispered to it. The reflection hesitated, then smiled, not widely, not grotesquely, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows how a conversation will end. "I don't need to," it said. The sound didn't travel through the air. It appeared inside me. The woods were closer now. Not physically. Distance remained the same, but conceptually. The clearing felt narrower. The trees seemed more attentive, their branches angled inward like listeners leaning in. I tried to leave again. This time the car wouldn't start. Not a dead battery, not a mechanical failure. The engine turned over smoothly, obediently, and then shut itself off as if reconsidering. I tried again. Same result. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, breathing slowly, feeling something like resignation creep in. The voice spoke, not from the woods, not from the house, from the space between breaths. "You don't need to go," it said. "I do," I snapped. "I need help." A pause. Then, "From whom?" I didn't answer, because the question wasn't rhetorical. I pictured police, doctors, family. Every option involved speaking, explaining, using my name. The forest didn't forbid leaving, it made leaving impractical. By afternoon, the house had begun to offer things, small conveniences. The tap stopped dripping. A loose floorboard near the bedroom no longer creaked. The lamp flickered less. These changes felt intentional. Like incentives, I caught myself thinking, at least it's not trying to hurt me. The thought horrified me, because it meant I was already negotiating. The voice spoke again while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cabinet where the names were carved. "You're struggling because you think this is theft," it said. I looked at the wood grain, at my brother's name buried among dozens of others. "What else would it be?" The voice softened. "Succession," the word echoed. "You're not being erased," it continued. "You're being relieved." I felt anger flare, real anger, sharp and grounding. "I didn't ask for this." "No," it agreed. "You asked to be alone." My hands clenched into fists. "And alone is loud," it said. "Alone makes you talk to yourself. Alone makes you answer." I stood abruptly, chair scraping across the floor. "I won't give you my name." A pause. Then the voice said something that made my stomach drop. "I don't need it from you anymore." I froze. "What do you mean?" The house grew very quiet. Then, from the back of the hallway, from the direction of the bathroom, the sound of running water. The sink. I hadn't turned it on. I moved slowly, heart pounding toward the sound. The bathroom light was off. The doorway yawned, dark. I flicked the switch. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. A handprint appeared on the glass, not pressed from my side, from the inside, then letter by letter traced through the condensation. A word formed. Daniel. My handwriting. My grip tightened on the doorframe. The voice whispered, close and satisfied. Someone else already answered. That night the door opened, not with a sound, not with force. I was sitting on the mattress when I felt it. The shift in air, the subtle change in pressure that says a boundary has been crossed. Footsteps followed, not heavy, confident. I stayed still, every nerve screaming. The footsteps stopped near the doorway. I didn't look. I couldn't. Then my own voice spoke, warm and familiar. "You can rest now." I squeezed my eyes shut. "No," I whispered. "I'm still here." A pause. Then, almost kindly, "So am I." I felt the presence lean closer, not touching, not threatening, sharing space, breathing when I breathed. I understood then what the forest truly wanted. Not possession, delegation. It didn't want to destroy me. It wanted to use me less. To let something more efficient take over the speaking, the answering, the being called. I felt myself slipping, not into darkness, but into quiet. A dangerous, seductive quiet. As consciousness thinned, one final thought burned through me, sharp and desperate. If I don't answer, maybe it can't finish. I focused on that idea like a lifeline. Silence, I told myself. Silence is resistance. The last thing I heard before sleep, or whatever came after, was my own voice somewhere else in the house, practicing. Not my name, someone else's. A different cadence, a new beginning. And far beyond the walls, deep in the network of roots and listening things, the forest hummed, not in hunger, not in triumph, but in readiness. I didn't disappear all at once. That's the lie people tell because it makes endings easier to digest. They imagine a moment where something snaps, where a person crosses a line and is simply gone, replaced in a clean, dramatic instant. But replacement doesn't work that way. Replacement is gradual, administrative, a series of small approvals you don't remember giving, until one day you realize the paperwork is complete and your signature is everywhere. The morning after the door opened, I woke up in the wrong position. I don't mean uncomfortable, I mean incorrect. My body lay diagonally across the mattress, feet hanging slightly off the edge, arms folded loosely over my chest in a posture I never used. It felt staged, like someone had arranged me the way a person arranges furniture to see how it looks in a room. For several seconds I didn't move. I listened. The house was quiet but not empty. There was a sense of ongoing activity, the way you can feel people awake in a building before you hear them. Pipes clicked faintly. Wood settled. The air moved with purpose. I sat up slowly. Nothing hurt. That too was wrong. After days of tension, exhaustion, clenched muscles and shallow sleep, my body should have ached. My head should have throbbed. My throat should have been raw from whispering and not screaming. Instead, I felt rested, not refreshed, optimized. The thought slipped into my mind without resistance, as if it belonged there. You needed this. I flinched. That wasn't my voice. Not exactly. It sounded like my internal monologue after it's been cleaned up, hesitations removed, doubts smoothed over. The version of yourself you hear when you're explaining something confidently to someone else. I stood and went to the window. The clearing looked the same. The trees stood in their usual positions. Birds moved through the branches, tentative but present. Everything looked normal. And for the first time since I arrived, that terrified me more than the nights ever had. I spoke aloud as I moved through the house, not to ward anything off, but to test myself. "I'm going to the kitchen," I said. My voice sounded calm, steady, too steady. I opened the cabinet beneath the sink. The names were still there, dozens of them, carved shallow and deep, overlapping, crossing languages and decades. My brother's name remained, split into the wood like a wound that never healed. But something had changed. Near the bottom corner, fresh, pale against darker wood, was a new carving. My name, Daniel. It wasn't gouged. It wasn't frantic. It was neat, careful, finished. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the cabinet, heart pounding. "No," I said aloud. "No, no, no." The word no felt weak, unconvincing. The voice responded, not from the woods, not from the walls, from the space behind my eyes. "You're misreading it," it said gently. I shook my head. "You said you don't take names." "And I don't," it replied. "You offered function, I documented it." The choice of words chilled me. Documented. I realized then that this wasn't a haunting, it was a process. The mirror confirmed it. I avoided it as long as I could, hours maybe. But mirrors are everywhere, and sooner or later you catch yourself in one by accident. I was passing the bathroom when I saw movement in the corner of my vision. I stopped, turned. The mirror showed me standing in the hallway, face pale, eyes ringed with shadow, but the posture was wrong. The man in the reflection stood straighter, shoulders relaxed, head tilted slightly, as if evaluating the room rather than reacting to it. I raised my hand. The reflection didn't wait. It raised its hand first. A fraction of a second before I moved, my heart began to race. The reflection smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly, reassuringly. "I can take over whenever you want," it said. The sound did not travel through the air. It appeared fully formed in my mind, like a thought I hadn't authored. "I don't want you to," I whispered. The reflection's smile softened. "I know," it said. You're afraid of losing control. I swallowed hard. You're not me. A pause. Then, with unsettling sincerity, I'm better at being you. The sentence landed cleanly. No flourish, no threat, just data. And somewhere deep inside me, a terrible realization began to take shape. It wasn't lying. I tested the world. I spoke my name out loud, alone in the living room. Daniel! The sound felt thinner than it should have, less anchored, like calling into a space that no longer recognized the call as authoritative. The house did not respond. The forest did, not with a voice, but with a tension. The air seemed to shift, tightening subtly around the syllables, as if they'd been filed away. I tried again. Daniel. This time the response came from behind me. Yes? My own voice. Calm. Curious, I spun around. The room was empty. But the answer had come quickly, too quickly, like a well-trained reflex. Stop, I said louder now. A pause. Then my voice, not from my mouth, answered, why? The question was genuine. That scared me more than defiance ever could. By afternoon, the house began acting as if it belonged to someone else. Doors opened smoothly when I approached them, as if anticipating my movement. Drawers slid without sticking. The kettle began to heat before I touched it. I hadn't turned it on. I realized then that the house wasn't responding to me. It was responding to something that shared my shape. I heard footsteps upstairs. That was impossible. The house had no second floor. The steps were light, measured, familiar. I stood at the base of the hallway, heart hammering, listening as they moved from room to room with the confidence of someone who knew the layout intimately. Then my own voice drifted down, casual, conversational. Everything's fine, it said. I'm just checking. Checking what? I demanded. Fit, the voice replied. You left things messy. I clenched my fists. Get out of my house. A pause. Then laughter. Not loud, not mocking, understanding. This was never your house, the voice said gently. It's a station. A station. A place where something stops briefly before moving on. The footsteps descended the hallway. I backed away instinctively. A figure appeared at the far end, solid now, fully resolved. It was me, not distorted, not wrong, just finished. He wore my clothes, moved with my ease. His eyes held none of my hesitation. He looked at me with something like sympathy. You don't have to fight this, he said. You were never good at carrying it all. I felt tears burn. You don't get to decide that. He smiled sadly. You already did. The confrontation didn't end with violence. It ended with efficiency. He stepped past me without resistance. The air seemed to rearrange itself to make room for him. As he moved, I felt pieces of myself peel away. Not painfully, but with a sense of inevitability. Memories dulled, names lost urgency. The sharp edges of guilt softened, as if someone had turned the volume down. I slumped against the wall, breathing hard. The other me paused at the front door. I'll take care of it, he said. I'll answer when they call. The door opened for him, not for me. He stepped out into the clearing. The forest responded, not with sound, but with recognition. Branches shifted. The air warmed slightly, like a welcome. I tried to stand. My legs failed. The door closed, not slammed, sealed. The house settled. And in that moment, as silence wrapped around me like insulation, I understood the final cruelty of what had happened. I hadn't been erased. I had been retained, left behind, as residue, as background noise, as something that remembers what it was like to be needed. From somewhere deep in the woods, I heard my voice speak again, confident, practiced, complete. Daniel. And this time, I didn't answer. End of episode 5. Quando estiver pronto para o desfecho final, diga. I don't know how long I stayed there after the door closed. Time stopped behaving the way it should have. Not frozen, thinned. Moments stretched and folded back on themselves, like a page being creased and uncreased until the words blurred. At first, I thought I had lost consciousness, but I hadn't. I was still here. That was the punishment. The house no longer reacted to me. That was the first thing I noticed. I stood, eventually, legs weak, balance uncertain, and took a step toward the kitchen. Nothing happened. No subtle shift of air, no anticipatory creak of floorboards, no sense of being acknowledged. I was invisible, not physically, but functionally. The house had reassigned its attention. I touched the wall. The wood felt colder than before, like it no longer retained my heat. When I spoke, my voice sounded wrong, flattened as if the room refused to carry it properly. "Hello," I called. The sound died a few feet from my mouth. I said my name. "Daniel." Nothing answered. That silence was different from the earlier listening silence. This one wasn't curious. It was complete. The realization hit me slowly, and then all at once. The system had moved on. I tried to leave the house. The front door opened easily. For me, at least. That surprised me. The clearing lay beyond, pale and quiet under a grey sky. The forest stood at its usual distance, unchanged, as if nothing significant had happened. I stepped onto the porch. The moment my foot touched the wood, something inside me twisted sharply. Not pain. Correction. I stumbled, grabbing the railing, gasping as a wave of disorientation washed through me. The world seemed to misalign for a second, colors dulling, depth flattening, sound slipping out of sync. The forest spoke, not aloud, directly. "You are not assigned to outside anymore." I staggered back, heart pounding. "Let me go," I whispered. A pause. Then, with no malice and no warmth, "You are complete where you are." The door behind me closed, not locked, finalized. Days, or something like them, passed. I slept, but the sleep was shallow and unsatisfying. I ate, but food tasted thin, like a memory of flavor. My body functioned, but only because it remembered how. I was running on stored patterns. Sometimes I heard him, the other me, outside. His voice drifted in from the woods, confident and calm, calling to people I couldn't see. Sometimes it practiced names out loud, rolling them carefully, tasting their weight. Each name carried a reaction in the forest: approval, recognition, integration. I began to understand the scale of it. This place wasn't unique. The house wasn't special. It was a node, a relay station in a vast, patient network that predated language and would outlive it. Forests weren't the source. They were the medium. Roots carried nutrients. Mycelium carried memory. And now names carried identity from one place to another. Caretakers changed. The system remained. I found the tape recorder on the kitchen table one morning. I don't know how it got there. I don't know how long it had been waiting. It looked old, plastic yellowed with age, a single red light glowing steadily. Recording. My stomach clenched. I sat across from it slowly, like approaching an animal that might bolt. The tape rewound by itself. The mechanical whine sounded impossibly loud in the deadened air. A click. Then my voice played back, clear, confident, composed. "Daniel," it said, "if you're hearing this, it means the transition didn't erase you completely." I felt cold spread through my chest. "That wasn't supposed to happen," my voice continued. "Usually the residue fades faster." "Residue, that's what you are now," it said gently. "A remainder, a control sample." I whispered, "You're not me." The tape didn't pause. "I am what you were becoming," it replied, "and what you refused to finish." Images flooded my mind. Me standing in the woods, answering names, soothing fear, guiding people gently toward the same relief I'd been offered. "You were good at listening," the voice said. "You just hated the cost." The tape clicked off, the red light went dark, but the words stayed. I don't know why the forest let me keep awareness. Maybe it was a flaw, maybe it was intentional. A warning needs a witness. I began to notice small fractures in the system, moments where efficiency faltered, names spoken too quickly, a hesitation before an answer, a pause where doubt slipped in. Those pauses were me. I couldn't speak to people. I couldn't intervene directly. But sometimes, when silence stretched just a second too long, I could press something into the gap. A feeling, a flicker of unease, a hesitation. And when someone hesitated, when they didn't answer immediately, the forest reacted. Not with anger, with recalculation. Those moments mattered. They were the only resistance left. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you're listening from. But if you're hearing this story, then understand something. The forest doesn't need trees. It needs space. It grows anywhere isolation lingers long enough to become familiar, anywhere guilt sits unspoken, anywhere silence learns the shape of your name. If something calls you from the dark, from another room, from the edge of sleep, from the place where grief waits, do not answer. Not yes. Not who's there. Not even a sound. Because the moment you respond, the system begins to learn. And it learns quickly. If you hesitate, if you feel that instinctive pull to reply, that pause. That's me. That's what's left of Daniel. And if the silence holds long enough, sometimes, just sometimes, the forest loses interest. Thank you for listening. Now listen carefully. If you hear your name tonight, let the silence answer instead.